Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to The Law. It is your legal lights, it is your help law. Today, this afternoon, we confront a question that has lingered for 2 decades. Why are 2.8 million Ghanaians with disabilities still waiting to fully enjoy their rights? In 2006, Ghana passed Act 715, the Persons with Disability Act, and later signed onto the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Yet, barriers remain in education, healthcare, employment, transport, and even access to justice. As Parliament prepares to consider the new Persons with Disability Bill 2026, we ask, will this finally close the gap and deliver dignity, equality, and inclusion? I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So, those of you who have been familiar with this program, there's something we do, we call it the Law 101. It's going to take a slightly new twist where I decide to spend the first 5 minutes or less with you to take one particular issue to give you an education that I believe will be platinum education to assist you and empower you with the law. But before I do that, let me introduce my guests who are here in the studio with me. Humphrey Mate-Kofi is lawyer, disability rights advocate. Also here is Josephine Kalira Talongo, who is also lawyer and human rights advocate. We have Juventus Dorina, who is a lawyer and disability rights advocate. Lady and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us.
Great. So let me go to the Law 101 right now. So welcome to the Law 101 after a little break. Every year, when the flood hits Accra, our cities and other cities, we rightly demand accountability from leadership. But the law doesn't just bind politicians. It binds citizens too. If you are among those who think throwing trash into open gutters, drains, or streets is just a bad habit, think again. It is a crime. Let's look at the statute books. Section 296 of the Criminal and Other Offences Act, 1960. Section 296 talks about nuisance. Throwing rubbish in the streets. The law is very clear, and I quote, a person commits a criminal offense and is liable to a fine not exceeding 10 penalty units. A penalty unit is 12 Ghana cedis. If they commit any of the acts under this section. Now let's break down exactly what acts will get you prosecuted under the law. The offending acts, what does the law prohibit? Let's get to that. If you are in any town, any place, which absolutely includes our city here, Accra, you break the law if you cause or permit to be placed a carrion or filth, dirt or refuse, rubbish, offensive or unwholesome matter. Where do you get caught by this law if you throw this rubbish? Those of you who gather them, put them in a sack, wait for the rains, and you show up and throw it into the drain. It says if you throw your rubbish on any street, any yard, any enclosure any open space except at a place specifically set apart by the local authority or health officer for that purpose. So if where you are throwing your rubbish is not designated by law enforcement or your local assembly as a place where you can dump refuse, you get into trouble if you do this. If you throw it into the bin, you are safe. But if you throw them into the gutter, you are in trouble. Now, you that is occupying the facility or the house around which is thrown, you have a liability. If you are the occupier of a land or a building in a town, the law places a strict duty on you. You must clear and keep your land free from dirt, rags, broken bottles, and refuse. Crucially, you must keep it free from any offensive matter, filling up the holes with stones, gravel, or other like materials, the streets or roads, at the front, back, and sides of it. We see it everywhere. As I drove here, I've seen people gather gravel. Some people brought sand, and they put it on part of the road. If you do that, it's an offense. The rains come, they get into the drains, and they choke them, or they are shifted into the channels, and they are choked. And here we are. There's flood, and it's killing us. So, this is where duty, or civic duty, meets sanction. Yes, we need leadership to provide the bins and clear the major waterways. But as citizens, Section 296 of the Criminal and Other Offences Act makes your trash your legal responsibility. So stop choking the drains, stop flooding the city, and stop breaking the law. And this is the Law 101. Thank you very much. Now let me get to my guest, and let's begin to talk about the most important matter that we are tabling for discussion this afternoon. So it's been 2 decades since the Persons with Disability Act 715 was passed in 2006. So why are we here today complaining about 2.8 million Ghanaians with disabilities still facing barriers? Why has implementation lagged so badly despite the constitutional, or call it the statutory guarantees that you are supposed to enjoy? Let's start with you. Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samson. I love the opening statement, which encompasses constitutional guarantee, because if you look at Article 25, which talks about educational inclusion, and also Article 29, which specifically talks about persons with disability, injustice, discrimination. And even beyond that, if you look at Chapter 6 of the Directive Principles of State Policy, particularly Article 35 and through, you ask yourself, if we have these constitutional provisions that really explains the reason why persons with disabilities should be given all the necessary support to be able to perform, devoid of inhibitions and barriers or anything that will impair their functioning, then we shouldn't be talking at this time about what are the issues. But of course, we agree that the Persons with Disability Act, first of all, was enacted in 2006. We went further to also sign on to the United Nations Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability. We further went into signing the optional protocol in 2012. But at the time that we developed the Act, the UNCRPD was not designed. And the Act that we developed had more of a charity and medical model. So what it is now is that with the new amendments, we're seeking to incorporate a solid social foundation that will also look at the human right perspective, because it is the reason why we are not where we should be, and that is why we have thought it wise to amend SIM to reflect the UNCRPD, which we ourselves voluntarily as a country went further to sign the optional protocol. And we did not come about any reservation to the signing of the treaty. I mean, we did not say that these ones are reservations of Ghana and all that. Everything was signed up hook, line, and sinker. So it is for us to ensure that the principles in the UNCRPD are in consonance with the Act. Because if you send any matter to the court at the moment, the court will not rely on the UNCRPD. The court will be relying on Act 715, because it is the one that is speaking the mind of the UNCRPD. So that is why we are where we are.
Right. Humphrey, you are a seasoned disability rights advocate. And as I have checked on you, you have extensive experience in human rights law, particularly mental health, and you have had a focus on promoting the rights of persons with psychological disabilities. Your introduction tells me you literally sleep with the Persons with Disability Act, taking us through the Constitution to conventions, even to the statutes.
That is so.
What would you say is lacking in the 2006 law for which a new bill has been tabled?
Great. Thanks for the question. Very important indeed. So there are a couple of issues that this new act would rather respond to in terms of what is lacking in 2006. Issues about reasonable accommodation, very critical. If somebody with a disability is in this building, the employer should ensure that they make available reasonable accommodation to ensure that the person is able to function. But that is not also in the 2006 Act.
2006
Yes.
Act.
Yes.
And I remember I've had to do advocacy around it because, like, providing, this situation where Josephine just climbed should not be there. There should be a pathway for a person with disability to be able to come up this place without these difficulties. Either there is a lift, or if there's not a lift, you call it, what is it?
A ramp.
A ramp. But as it is, that's not available. And it's almost everywhere. That law already caters for that. So what are you talking about?
So that is correct. Indeed, the 2006 Act made provision for accessibility.
Right.
But it did not go further to develop the standards. And that is what the UNCRPD is seeking to establish. That if you talk about accessibility, what are the standards? We should be able to be guided by the standards that should set out the general standards internationally and even within our setting. There was a 10-year moratorium with this 2006 Act where public buildings were supposed to be retrofitted to respond to the accessibility standards. But as we speak, the moratorium is expired. You see public buildings coming up and nothing. You wonder whether the architects or the engineers are aware of these provisions. Not only that, but we've seen fleets of buses that are coming through, Metro Mass, STC. Are we conscious of ensuring that we have made those buses accessible to people with disability? If you travel outside, it's common knowledge to find that the public buses have steps that you can even get on through a ramp that is set down.
That's right.
For you to get in. When you get in, there's a designated place for persons with disability.
Right.
Now that we are seeing the buses, what accommodation are we making for persons with disability? I know that the Ghana Federation of Disability have had a first discussion with the Minister of Transport. I'm looking to see whether these fleets of buses that will come in will reflect the discussions that they have made. If they haven't, then it means that they didn't bother. because there has been a discussion on the matter. And if we are saying that we want to make them have access to public transport and buildings, we need to make a conscious effort, and that should be intentional. And that is why I think even contractors' bits of bid documents that they submit, the ministry should ensure that they have captured those areas which will make the building accessible for persons with disability.
Thank you. So Josephine, and Josephine is also a human rights advocate. Her practice spans intellectual property, commercial law, family law, and immovable property law, and she's committed to advancing disability rights through legal reform. I have had the privilege of being with Josephine at very close range by way of providing some small training. What Humphrey just spoke about, you go to public buildings, you go to universities, and I have seen this situation even in my own alma mater, University of Ghana, where people are being carried, and it's so disheartening. Right. And of course, I post this confession that in our law firm, where you were,
yes,
the difficulty is there, even though we provide it at the entrance into the building,
yes,
but when you're climbing up, there's a difficulty. Yes. We need to work on that. What do you say about what is about to be done? What are the difficulties and what should happen?
What do I say about what is to be done?
Right.
So what I think...
First, let's assess what the problems are, even in spite of the existing law.
Yes. Okay, so also because before the existing law came into being, in my personal experience, there was very little to no accessibility. And so when the new law came into existence, that would be the Disability Act 715. It was, I would like to believe and appreciate that it was a landmark legislation passed.
It was celebrated.
It was. And although it did not reflect fully the protection of rights of persons with disabilities, it actually did cover some parts of legal protection for persons who live with disabilities. However, I think there has been evolution, there's been growth in this day and age, and the basis upon which the previous law or the current law, Act 715, was enacted, I would like to believe that it was based on the question of how can the state help people with disabilities rather than how do we protect their rights. And flowing from that, we come to have the UNCRPD, which seeks to promote the rights of persons with disabilities, which is actually groundbreaking if we did implement it. And so I believe that although it has been ratified by Parliament, we still need to take steps to domesticate it so that it can be part of our existing law through an amendment or the creation of a new bill. And it's going to go a long way to have an inclusive community, which will not only strengthen our society. I believe all of us as Ghanaians are stakeholders in this conversation.
That's right.
We all should be concerned because disabilities, people are not only born with disabilities, but you can encounter it at any point in your life.
That's right.
And there are people who did not know they were going to lose an arm or a leg, and today they are facing the challenges that those of us who grew up with it, have faced. And if we all champion the cause for it to be passed, that is the new Disability Act, it's going to go a long way to create some inclusivity.
Thank you. Now let's hear also from Juventus Dorina, who is also a lawyer, and he's a passionate disability rights advocate with many years of experience in disability law and development work. His expertise lies in human rights with a strong focus on disability rights advocacy. I've met you, I think, once or twice, and
Yes.
I'm excited to see you here today. So, Acts 715 has been criticized for, as it were, failing to address inclusive education, healthcare, and access to justice. What are the most glaring omissions when you compare it to the CPD framework that you all have started talking about already?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm very, very excited to be here to have this conversation with you. Honestly, you are very right, as you said earlier on. First of all, I am a person with lived experience as a person with disability. And if you look at Ghana's effort first to help persons with disability, that is with the Act 715, it gave some clear provisions that will make persons with disability feel included in our society. But if you go through the Act, there's a lot of gaps, as you mentioned, about 7 that I can talk of. I think my learned friend here have already mentioned some of them. And one area that I really want to talk about is when it comes to holding people accountable. Or let's say if the Act is in place, the provisions are there, who are the ones monitoring to make sure that they are actually being implemented? And if they are not, who are we holding accountable? As you earlier on explained. For instance, I build a house, or I build a story building, and then in that story building we don't have a lift, there's no accessibility. And we know that this building is a public building. Persons with disability will have to come in there. Who do I hold accountable? There are some schools that do not accept persons with disability. Who are we holding accountable? Because when you go to the school will tell you they don't have the resources.
Really?
Yes. But at the end of the day, who do we hold accountable? It means that persons with disability cannot then have access to education. That is why Ghana signed on to the UNCRPD, which gives more provision for the state. And this is not actually an independent thing. Honestly, if you look at the CRPD, it demands that there should be an independent organization who will go around and make sure that all the laws that have been passed are actually being implemented, that people are actually enjoying those rights, you see? And that is what the Act 715 doesn't have. And if you look at the definition of disability in the Act, it looks like they took disability like a charity model or like a medical model. There's nothing like human rights protection. They are looking at, how can we help this person? How can we support this person? But no, these people have legal rights, And I can be a service provider and providing services. If a person with disability comes to me and I see that person as they have also right to accept those services, then I will be enforced to to provide that person with that services. But if I see that person as a charity model, then there is no legal basis or there's no liability on me to provide that services, And that is why we are fighting for this law to be passed, so that we can enjoy our rights.
So, look, someone and the interpreter you're listening to who is helping us to bring his thoughts, very, germane concerns and expertise to you, is Jonathan Dako in team. Someone like you, is it about 2-3 years ago you got qualified at the bar and were excited, we met, were exchanging pleasantries, everybody was surprised how you did it, and you are not the first, there are several others. That you are going into a school and some people decide to say, we will not accept you. What's the basis for that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, this question comes back to as the question, who are we holding responsible for? If you look at me, I'm a deaf person. The Disability Act, the Act 715, it's stated clearly in there that service providers should at least provide services for all persons with disability. But now I've spent 7 years in Legon. Not because I chose Legon, but because Legon was the only place I could have sign language interpretation services. So when I was doing my LLB in Legon, that time I was already working. And I had other private universities around who were also doing LLB, providing that same course. But why didn't I go to those schools? Because there was no sign language interpretation services for me over there. But in Legon, I was given that services. So I chose maybe to go to Legon so that I can have that services where actually I can work, be in school, and my services will be provided for me to actually go to school. And that is what Humphrey mentioned earlier on, reasonable accommodation. But in other schools, when you go, they'll be like, oh, you're a deaf person. We can't take you because we can't pay for an interpreter.
Yeah, but this is who he is, and yet he's been able, to go through law education. And he excelled anyway. So why?
You see, for many organizations or for many institutions, providing these services comes with a cost. For example, if I have to come to my interpreter, I'm always happy that for me, when I went to the Ghana School of Law at Makola, they understood my needs. So they allowed me to come with my interpreters, and the school took care of them. And in the private situation, the private schools, that will not happen, because then nobody would want to bear that cost. Because then if you are paying school fees, we have to pay your interpreters. No, they wouldn't want to do that. But if the bill gives that responsibility to government, and government is the one bearing the cost of that services being provided, then it means that deaf people will have access to education. Then there wouldn't be these challenges. I hope it's clear.
Right.
So it's not, this doesn't only apply to deaf people, but it applies to other persons with disability. For example, children who have cerebral palsy, for instance, they have a lot of needs.
That's right.
They have a lot of support. So it means that it involves resources, which the private sector are not willing to provide. So if a parent cannot afford, then it means that that child will have to be at home. But at the end of the day, who is the parent going to report to? Who is going to hold the institutions accountable? Nobody.
Right. So, Humphrey, you had mentioned, started us with Ghana signing on to the UN Convention in 2008 and ratifying the optional protocol in 2012. Which obligations under the CRPD remain unmet and why?
Okay, so let me say that several others, including the fact that, in fact, let me say that the new law has some elements which I'm so extremely happy
The bill.
about. Yes, the new bill, sorry. Especially in the area of mental health because of my interest. It talks about I'll remember.
That's fine.
But what it means is that if somebody has a mental health condition, he can let the hospital note how he wants to be treated if he should go into any situation.
Okay.
So it is not for the hospital to decide how it should be done. But when he was stable, he did mention that if I go into my situation as usual, as a person with mental health condition, this is how I want to be treated. Which is very good because it tells you that the person has that legal capacity to take a decision not influenced by any other person. So back to your question, the issue relating to, for instance, the definition of disability, if you look at what the 715 said, it did not take into cognizance, it talked about sensory, mental health, but it did not talk about the impairment and the fact that attitudinal and environmental situation impair the function or inhibits the functioning of persons with disability. It just described it, wholly like that with persons with sensory impairment, that. So, but the new one will take care of that. So it gives a broader understanding of what disability is. And it's very important because if we limit the definition of disability, then it affects how we are able to assist or ensure that they function because of the narrow definition of same. So that is one. Secondly, the issue to do with education. Even though Article 25 talks about inclusive education, further on to 29, the issue of education is not well defined in the old bill, in the old act. But the new one takes cognizance of inclusive education, making sure that anybody with any physical or whatever impairment or whatever disability should be able to fit into any school. You know, not that you exclude a particular school and say this is for persons with disability.
Right.
It even makes it difficult for integration and inclusion, because if you and then further on, it stigmatizes persons with disability. Now, the new law, if you make a derogatory statement against persons with disability, there are some penalties.
That's already in the old law.
Yes.
Yes, it is. But the sanction, I mean, the sanctions for that is now pitched up.
Okay.
So you cannot just say anything as if you think, because if you look at how persons with disability are described in various languages, you may not want to hear it, because it is so derogatory, and that is what is also perpetuating the stigma. Now, the issue of disability, we need to understand as Ghanaians that disability is closer to all of us. You may want to descend this staircase and you may slip.
That's right.
In fact, I have seen people who were working well but are now using crutches.
Oh, we have had even politicians tell us about the experience. Ivor Green Street.
Yes.
You know, and now former president.
Our own
before,
president.
You know,
Now sitting in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I have had people, I've come into contact with people who have taken medications and have gone visually impaired or blind.
Yeah.
Because the medications were not the proper one, or their blood types did not correspond with the medications that they were given.
I have an intern in my firm now who, you know, is a friend, and who, you know, by an accident, now he can see.
Wow.
That's not how he was born. But he's in law school.
Wow.
And why should that person be discriminated against in where they want to fit in a school?
Yeah, that is very true. That is very true. And issues about mental health come to people without their notice, and it's also not a respecter of persons.
That's right.
People go into situations, they become depressed, they lose their investment, people lose their loved ones, they lose property, and they become depressed, and that is it. Like you just mentioned, some people even get into accident, have head injuries, and that is the beginning. So essentially what I'm trying to draw attention at is that issues about disability are closer to us than we think. And we shouldn't say that, like you did mention, our own President Akufo, he was popularly called the gentle giant.
Correct.
You know, I don't think somebody ever thought that he would be in a wheelchair, with the greatest of respect to him.
That's right.
But what I'm trying to draw attention is that, look, we walk every day, we slip sometimes. You know, we go into situations, dangerous situations.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen persons who are burn survivors. It was just gas. And you know, we all work with gas in the kitchen. But these are accidents that happen, and their faces became defamed. So essentially what I'm trying to draw attention to is that disability is very closer to us. It's not an isolated case for certain group of people. Right. It can happen to you with a trip. I mean, the span of the moment, and you become what you are not.
Right.
So let's give the necessary attention to this bill, because if it works, it's going to respond to so many things.
Right.
And the more it lingers on and not going through the process and now to be called a law, the more the rights of persons with disability.
We'll come to the part of the advocacy, because we'll conclude with that, even though all the discussion is geared towards the advocacy to get a new bill that is fit for purpose and compliant with the CRPD. Humphrey Mate Kofi is lawyer, disability rights advocate. He has, you know, interest in mental health. Josephine Kalera Tanlongo is a human rights advocate. She's also a lawyer. And Juventus Dorina is a lawyer, disability rights advocate. And he's here together with his interpreter, Jonathan Dako, in team. If you are here with us, this is the law. It is your legal light. It is your help law. As you know, the flooding situation is becoming serious, and there's a collapse, a building collapse at Aveno. The Vice President and the Interior Minister have been there. The Interior Minister has indicated that there will be a probe, there will be investigations into it, and then sanctions will be meted out to culprits. And the Vice President has also been speaking there and, as it were, cautioning and advising that we all be careful and ensure we engage experts to get the right things, building processes, so that we don't get some of the situations that we find ourselves in. So, Josephine,
Senior.
Civil society has pushed for reform for quite a while now, particularly the Federation of the Disabled and many others. But government action has been slow. What, from where you sit, must Parliament and the Executive do now to expedite the passage of the new bill?
Yes, okay, so like I mentioned before, it should be prioritized. I think that at this point, Parliament should take it into consideration. Further debate should be had about it in Parliament, and then progressively we have the bill passed, and then the presidential assent will also be required. But beyond that, there's a situation of us passing and enacting laws without implementing them. And so there should be strict structures put in place and a lot more conversation and awareness put in place to ensure that in the event that the new bill is passed, it will be implemented to its full extent. And that is going to go a long way to help us. At the end of the day, what the UNCRPD aims to promote is eliminating societal barriers that prevent people with disabilities from actually living to their full potential.
Correct.
And so we want to stop seeing things like we need specialized schools for people with disabilities. In my personal experience, when I was going to high school, I had a situation where I wanted to study general arts, but then there was a lot of talks between the management of the school and my parents to put me in the business class, which I had no interest in because they could not accommodate me in the school. So then one of the considerations was, okay, there's a few schools that are inclusive. I would say Okwapeman Senior High School or St. Martin's. But also, I know what school I want to go to, and I don't necessarily have to find myself in St. Martin's, although it's inclusive. I should be able to go to another school.
Once you're qualified.
Yes, once I'm qualified. And so it was a lot of deliberation as to whether I should find myself in a business school or in the general arts class. Eventually, accommodation was made to, yes, help me, but then I don't think it is something that is sustainable.
Right. And you think this new bill will take care of that situation?
Yes.
More particularly, enforcement.
Exactly.
Let me go back to Humphrey on this, because I remember when, in 2006, the act was passed, and then there was a need to pass the legislative instrument or so. It was taking forever.
That is very true. I mean, learning from those lessons, as we amend this bill, we are working also on the regulation.
Okay.
So that immediately it's passed, it can also be laid. You are right. You see, the issue of enforcement is very critical. And for me, I'll even qualify by saying strict enforcement. If public buildings are coming up and they are being funded by governments or donor agents, they should follow the strict accessibility protocol and make it accessible. If buses are coming through, every new bus should be retrofitted to be able to accommodate persons with disability. Whether he has clutches, whether he has a wheelchair, he should be able to rightly drive through and go to the designated area. In the developed world.
You just mentioned the designated area, which is clearly provided for by the existing law.
Yes.
But we are abusing it, and there are no sanctions. I don't remember that anybody is being sanctioned for that. Talking about using derogatory words against persons with disabilities, I don't remember seeing that, or hearing the news that somebody's being punished for all of that. But all of that exists in the law. So like Josephine said, enforcement is as important or even more important perhaps than the passage.
That is true. And we're going to test the law in recent times. Once we get this passed, we're going to test the law.
Great.
I'm sure the disability caucus, especially the lawyers around, would really take this one up. It's something that we've been thinking about.
Right.
Because enforcement is very critical. We can have all the nice laws in our books, but if enforcement is not strong, forget about it.
Right.
So that is one thing we are looking at. And I pray the Speaker of Parliament, together with the Disability Caucus in Parliament, that they are doing some good works, but I think that they can step up this one so that we get it passed anyway.
Right. So, Juventus, what mechanisms are you thinking about should be built into the new bill to guarantee compliance and accountability?
Thank you. Honestly, I think it's very important that we've learned a lot from the old Act 715, the old bill. And as I said earlier on, there was a lot of gaps in that one. We were able to identify about like 7 gaps. And in all, if you look at these gaps, we have been able to rectify them in the new bill. And once it being passed, the first thing I would want to talk about is, or emphasize on, is that the law, the new bill is very, very detailed. And it also captures people, those who will be held responsible.
Right.
So for instance, transportation. If the buses, we have new buses in the country, and these buses are not accessible, the new bill should make sure that those who imported these buses should be held responsible.
Great.
And they should answer for that. And it's not just our buses, but our buildings. I have actually gone through the legal data. I have tried to research to see if there are any judgments on Act 715. And I couldn't even find, it's just a handful. Very few. I couldn't even get up to even 10. Surprisingly, 10 judgments stating the Act 715 for 20 years. 2.8 people, 2.8 million people still waiting. Why? We know that it's not like we don't know the way to the court. We know the way to the court, but is it accessible in the first place? Not. It is not accessible. So this new bill captures all that. When it comes to reasonable accommodation, it means that now when we go to the court, our issues can be tabled and we know that we will get judgment. And it's not just about that, but for instance, I'm from Upper West. And in those days, I had to leave the Upper West and come to Mampong just to get access to education, senior high school. I have to pick, a bus, sleep on the way, spend like 3 days on the way. And that is not fair. And that is not my choice, but I was limited, For public senior high schools, for instance, there should be reasonable accommodation services for all persons with disability so that they don't have to travel all the way from their villages to a new place just for accessibility issues. And especially when it comes to monitoring, we will need an institution that will actually monitor all that. Because if the law is, if the bill is being passed, and now we start implementation, there should be a place where we can go and lodge our complaints. That is the institution that will monitor, the bill and make sure that everybody who is not complying with the laws are held responsible. And I think that is very important.
As we understand, the disability community, you're insisting that you are not asking for charity, but you are demanding rights. How do we shift public perception from welfare to enforceable rights?
Yes, thank you so much for this. I think this is very important. If you look at our law in the 1992 Constitution, it tells us that it provides some protection for persons with disability. And that is, I'm not sure, but Article 17 talks about discrimination.
That's right, that's correct.
Yes. So in that, I think that a lot of responsibility will go to the state to do a lot of awareness, create a lot of awareness, make sure that people know that these are the things that our constitutions talk about, and we have to change the way we respond to persons with disability. Government, we know that is doing a lot, but at the end of the day, the perception of on persons with disability kind of differs when it comes to the society that we find ourselves in. When people see persons with disability, they see them from the economic perspective.
That's right.
That, oh, this person is disabled and therefore he needs help. Or this person cannot, contribute to society, or he cannot give us anything. But if this person is giving access, this person, the system is working for this person will be able to contribute to society, and society wouldn't see this person as a burden,
right,
but rather as someone who can also contribute to society. So we want to emphasize on this, that for instance, when I was in school, I met a lot of people who had similar conditions as myself, but they were not accepted because people thought that, because they are deaf people, what future can they actually have? How can they contribute to this family? They were always neglected. And there are other people who are deaf people, because of this, they refuse to accept that they are deaf people, even though they cannot talk, they cannot hear, but they don't want that label as deafness. And I'm very happy with this new bill, because then even the quota system in the new bill will also make sure that persons with disability can get a decent job and they are economically empowered, so that that perception that people have that persons with disability...
In 30 seconds, tell us about the quota system in this new bill.
So the quota system...
The game changer.
Yes, so the quota system, I think government has given... so let's say if you are employing, let's say, 100 people, 5% of them should be persons with disability.
Right.
That is the quota system. And then it means that if you are employing 100 people, at least, and this goes to the public spaces, at least out of the 100, 5% of it should go to persons with disability. And we are looking at it like it will act like the affirmative action bill for persons with disability.
But why should it be only for public employments, public jobs?
Yes, actually, so I'm actually emphasizing on public, because the public has, the state will have the resources to cater for that. And this will cover everyone when you're going into the public sector. All right. Because of the resources, the resource allocation. Okay.
So I'm going to come to you all for just about a minute each, or some less than that, to look directly into the camera and speak to the members of parliament, speak to the Speaker of Parliament, speak to the President, and speak to this country why this bill must be passed with the urgency that it deserves. I want to start, I want you, Jonathan, to say something, because you are with Juventus and you can appreciate his circumstance.
Okay, so for me, I would say that the law really, this bill has to be passed urgently, because if you look at the things that persons with disability are going through, it's not easy. I've been with Juventus for the past 5 years now. And when we go to court, sometimes he has to go to court and have to be his interpreter.
That's right.
Some of the courts are not really accessible, because when we get there, they don't understand that he has to actually follow the proceedings. He has to because, for instance, we go to court, and then maybe a court clerk will say that, you wait until your case is called before your interpreter will be allowed to interpret for you. But meanwhile, other lawyers are picking cues from the judge.
That's right.
He is missing all that. But if I was allowed to interpret for him, then he will also be able to pick all those cues to help his case. But that doesn't happen. Some other courts allow that, some don't.
Right.
So it's not just about employment and just education, but it covers every aspect of their life. So I think that it's very important that this...
Thank you. Humphrey.
Yeah, so to the extent that the more we delay in passing this bill into law, amounts to flagrant breaches of the rights of persons with disabilities, the reason why the President should take interest, as well as the Speaker of Parliament, and then the caucus, the Disability Caucus in Parliament. But let me also add that in terms of mental health, the mental health strategic plan also expires this year. 2026, I think, is from 2019 to 2026. And it's important that reform or we amend the strategic plan to also encompass areas around the CRPD, as well as the Mental Health Act aid forces, because at the time that it was passed, we didn't really take cognizance of the UNCRPD.
Thank you. Josephine?
Yeah, so I have a question. But before that, I want all the stakeholders, I want Parliament, I want the President, and every Ghanaian to imagine waking up and then your only challenge is not your ability to do or not to do anything, but the challenge would be not having a ramp available in your school, or even the Braille system in your school, or even at your workplace, or that your job interview immediately terminates just because whoever is interviewing you has seen your disability or has been exposed to it, or that you are a court user and you don't have an interpreter who can interpret in the language you can speak or you can communicate in. My question is, how do we as people and as the government and as stakeholders protect and guarantee the rights of the 2.8 million Ghanaians who live with disabilities and ensure that they also live and enjoy their rights just as anyone else?
Thank you very much. Juventus, you have the last word.
Thank you so much. For me, I would say that the inches between disability and you not being disability is not that much. What I'm trying to say is that you might be able today, and in the next second, you find yourself as a person with disability. I don't know if maybe, let's say, if the TV station can just pick one day and mute all your TV stations. Everything will be on live, but there will be no sound. And let's see how the world will enjoy the programs that runs on TV.
Certainly.
There are about 44,000 deaf people in Ghana.
Right.
And we watch TV, no sound. We can't hear anything. All we see is pictures, people moving their lips, and nothing. We don't understand what is happening.
That's vivid. Thank you very much.
I want to ask the politicians, please, it's very important that you pass this bill so that we can also have access and get to know what is happening in the world, because this can happen to everybody at any time. And
thank you very much. This is all time will allow. We have heard that disability rights are not about charity. They are about justice guaranteed by our Constitution and international law. 20 years is long enough. The passage of the Persons with Disability Bill 2026 is not just a legislative duty. It is a moral imperative. The question now is whether Ghana will act with urgency to protect the rights of 2.8 million citizens. Until then, the disability community waits, but their demand is clear: equal rights now. Thank you once again. My guests have been Humphrey Mate Kofi, who is a lawyer, disability rights advocate; Josephine Kalera Talongo, who is also a lawyer, human rights advocate; Juventus Dorina, who is a lawyer and disability rights advocate; and his interpreter is Jonathan Intim. This is the law. It's your legal rights. It's your legal rights. It is your help law. Have a good afternoon.